Hello friends, I don't know what about you, but I have sort of rituals and traditions that I follow each year, especially at the end of year. I have a tradition of sitting down and writing in my journal about each book that I've read throughout the year. The list of 2023 was incredibly long. I read 110 books this year, and it is well above the average amount of books that I read each year. I read around 90 to 100 books each year, and just the fact that I've managed to read so many books, even when my daughter was born and she needs a lot of attention and care, it just blows my mind. In this video, I wanted to share with you 10 books that I consider to be the best books that I've read this year. When I say the best, I mean that those books are going to stay with me throughout my life. I'm going to keep them permanently on my shelf. I'm going to reread them and reabsorb their ideas. The first book that I would like to share with you was written by Tom Holland, not the Spider-Man actor, but the historian. He has many books that I'm sure you've definitely heard about. His book called Rubicon or Persian Fire, but the book that I would like to tell you about is called Dominion, and the subtitle, the British subtitle of this book is The Making of the Western Mind. Tom Holland's book is a secular history of Christianity, and it tells us how Christianity influenced our way of thinking, how it evolved throughout the centuries. I was fascinated to discover that Stoic ideas had enormous influence on Christian morality. I was surprised to discover how much Aristotle and many other Greek and Roman thinkers had influenced Christianity, and that Christianity is not this fixed religion, but it's a religion that constantly evolved in terms of ideas. What I found the most interesting is that Tom Holland says that he spent his life studying ancient Romans, but more he studied them, more he understood that the morality that ancient Romans had was completely foreign to him.
Any sense I had that I was the heir of Greece or of Rome came under enormous strain. While, say, the Romans were a very moral people, it became increasingly clear to me that that morality was something very, very unsettling. The more I reflected on this, the more I kind of started thinking, well, what changed? Where do my instincts, where do my assumptions come from? And rather like someone, you've got an itch on your back and you're kind of trying to scratch it, and then finally I found it. I realized that essentially my friends, the country, the civilization I live in is actually not really the heir of Greece or Rome at all. It's been profoundly and utterly shaped by Christianity, to the degree that I say in the book that we, all of us in the West, whether we are believers or non-believers, whether we are Jews, Muslims, Hindus living in the West, we are all of us, in a sense, goldfish swimming in Christian waters, because Christianity has so radically affected our assumptions, not just about ethics or morality, but about the most basic way we contemplate society.
And in order to illustrate what exactly he means, I would like to tell you about the next book on this list, which is Marguerite Yourcenar's book called Memoirs of Hadrian. During the last weeks of his life, Emperor Hadrian decides to write a letter to Marcus Aurelius, his successor. He wants to tell to Marcus what he has learned throughout his life, what he found pleasurable, what sort of philosophy he had about music, about art, about his travels and conquests. And this book illustrates perfectly well how ancient Romans thought. If you like books such as Seneca's Letters, or if you like Horace's Epistles, if you like Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, this is a book that you will enjoy as well. This is actually one of the most gifted books by me. I gifted this book to so many people ever since I read it, and I was so shaken by the profound ideas of this book that I reread it the second time straight away. I never did anything like this. I've never reread a book just straight away after reading it. But After I reread it the second time, I was looking for another book of a similar kind, with a similar style, and I remember that my father recommended me Quo Vadis by Henryk Sienkewicz. Henryk Sienkewicz was a Nobel Prize winning author, Polish author, and Quo Vadis tells us a story, a love story between the Roman general Vinicius, who comes back to Rome after his military campaigns in Armenia, and he falls in love with a beautiful woman whose name is Lygia. But he soon discovers that Lygia is a Christian, and Christianity back then was prosecuted during the reign of Emperor Nero. This is a story of how Vinicius tries to understand what is Christianity, what is this religious sect that decides to be kind and merciful to everyone, is kind to the poor, is helpful to the weak. For him it is incomprehensible, but he tries to understand all those ideas because he's in love with Lygia. The beauty of the story, of how much he loves this woman, how much he tries to understand her beliefs, and how much she tries to accept him, although it kind of violates her religion, is just absolutely a beautiful story. There are so many beautiful scenes. For his brilliant writing style, Henryk Sienkewicz was awarded Nobel Prize for Literature. The next book that I would like to share with you is in fact slightly different, but of a similar kind. This book was discovered by a book hunter, by an Italian Renaissance book hunter, whose name was Poggio Bracciolini. Poggio Bracciolini traveled throughout France and visited different monasteries in search of ancient philosophical works that vanished and were looked after by the thinkers such as Vespasiano da Bisticci. In one of the monasteries, he stumbles upon Lucretius's The Nature of Things, which was written in the 1st century BC. Lucretius's poem is one of the most beautiful poems that I've read, because it tells us about the nature of the universe, about the philosophy of life in a beautiful verse. It is truly one of the most beautiful philosophical poems that I've read in life. So I cannot recommend this book enough to you, and just if you read a couple of quotes from it, you will just fall in love with it, and you'll definitely read it. It's a beautiful, absolutely beautiful book. The next book that really blew my mind was written by Boethius, who was a Roman senator who was falsely accused of treason and put in prison. In one day, Boethius' life turned upside down. He was one of the richest people in Rome. He was one of the most influential people in Rome. And then he was arrested, put in prison, and executed. His fortune turned upside down, and in prison he was trying to understand his fate. He was trying to console himself, and he wrote a book that we today know as the Consolations of Philosophy. In his prison cell, according to him, he was visited by an angel who turned out to be the goddess of philosophy, and he has conversations with her. This is an amazing book for you to read when you are going through difficult times. It tells you about how fortune can favor you or turn against you. What is truly the true meaning, the true foundation of happy life. I really enjoyed reading this book. I have actually a separate video on this book, which wasn't recommended by YouTube to many of you, just simply because it's a very niche topic. If you are interested, it will be linked down below. It's actually one of my favorite videos that I've done this year. Right, to continue with the philosophical theme, I would like to tell you about this book written by Leo Tolstoy. It's called Life. It is likely that you haven't heard about this book because it's incredibly rare. Even in Russian, I'm a native Russian speaker, I couldn't find a copy of this book. Sometimes I think that destiny kind of brings me close to certain books. Somehow, like, you can feel that there are no coincidences. I don't believe in coincidences, but it's a different subject. In this book, Tolstoy tells to himself. He's thinking about the meaning of life and the purpose of life, and he tells us what his philosophical reflections brought him to. This book was written when he was suffering from severe depression, apathy, nihilism, and he was ready to give up on his life. Writing this book saved him, and I think it's just like amazing recommendation, you know, like to say that a book that was written by one of the greatest authors about the meaning of life, what else do you need? In order not to take a lot of space in this video talking about this book, I would really recommend you to listen to my podcast episode that is dedicated to one of the passages that I've really enjoyed from this book. So it will be linked down below. It's called Tolstoy on Science and Religion. The next book is slightly different. It is a book about books. It was written by Martin Latham, who was one of the managers of Waterstone's bookshop here in England, in the city of Canterbury. This book is absolutely beautiful story about different ways how we read books, how we browse bookshops, about different bibliophiles throughout the centuries and how they collected books, how they read, how they preserved it. Once again, I have so much to tell about each book, but video format like this is very limiting, and if you would like to discover more about this book, I would really recommend you to read my newsletter article about it, which will be linked down below. But if you are a bibliophile, if you love bookshops and you like small stories about famous book collectors, book hunters, and libraries around the world, this is a book for you. And if you would like to make a present to someone who is a bibliophile like yourself, I would really recommend to buy this book. It's just absolutely brilliant. Those are kind of 6 main books that I really enjoyed this year, but there were many other ones. I really enjoyed reading W.G. Sebald's story Austerlitz. It is, in fact, I think the 3rd book that I read by W.G. Sebald, and I think he's an absolute genius. Austerlitz explores themes such as memory, time, and how we approach generally like our identity. It explores a lot of things that touched really close to my heart as a person who lived in 3 or 4 countries throughout his life. I was born in Armenia, I grew up in Moscow, Russia, I did my bachelor's in Prague, now I'm living in London. So like identity is a very big topic personally to me, and W.G. Sebald just masterfully explores it in his work. This year I also read a lot of books about physics, like popular science books about physics, and one of my favorite writers in this genre is Carlo Rovelli, who is an Italian physicist whose work focuses on quantum theory, and the way he communicates complex ideas for a person like myself who struggles sometimes to understand such complex ideas is just incredible. I feel that people like him who can communicate quantum theory in a language that is comprehensible is just nothing short of magic. And I really enjoyed his book called Anaximander, which is one of the first scientists. I think Carlo Rovelli says that Anaximander was the person who made the scientific revolution in the history of humanity, and he created scientific approach. You can find out about that book in one of my videos, which will be linked down below or somewhere in the corners. Another book by Carlo Rovelli that I enjoyed a lot is called Helgoland, which tells the story of how quantum physics was born, and the just mysteries of quantum physics and what it tells us about life. It tells us that essentially that life is a relation that you have with things, but it's a very complex idea. I'm not going to dive deep into here. I also enjoyed his book called Reality is Not What It Seems. All those books are just absolutely brilliant. If I could tell you and I ask you to please read everything that Carlo Rovelli wrote. And some of you know how much I adore the philosopher Nietzsche. I read everything that was written about him, and this year I've read a book called Nietzsche in Italy by writer Pourtales. I think it was somewhere here, yes. I remember where my books are just by heart. Like, you know, I have around 1,500 books, and I remember where each one of them is. It was a very enjoyable biography. It was written in a beautiful language. It tells us about the Nietzsche in Italy. You know, he lived in many cities of Italy, and I think one of the magic things that this book conveys is how much the environment that you create around yourself influences your creative processes, creative ideas, and how you perceive the world. I think one of the things that I aim to do in 2024 is to try to create those kind of environments for myself, you know, to shape it, to have a certain amount of information diet, a certain kind of more daily rituals instead of seasonal rituals like this. To have more daily rituals which will create an atmosphere around me. So if you love and reading Nietzsche, about Nietzsche, I would really recommend you to explore this book. I think that's it. Those are 10 books that I really enjoyed, maybe like a couple of more that I've thrown there. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel. I would like to make kind of a big announcement because I've been working on this project for a long time. I've recorded several videos, written several articles, and this project is about journaling. If you would like to start keeping a journal in 2024, please consider going to my Patreon, which is going to be entirely dedicated to journaling techniques. I've recorded several videos which are helping you to guide how you can start journaling, which those videos give you topics. You and I sit down and write journals together. So if you would like to start keeping a journal like myself, I've been keeping a journal for the past 15 years of my life, and when I say that I've been doing this, I'm saying that every day I sit down and I write one sentence or more in my journal. And if you would like to learn, if you would like to practice more, something like this, if this is one of the things that you have in New Year's resolution, consider going to my Patreon channel. I'm rambling right now. I wish you happy holidays, and I will see you in the next video. Ciao everybody!